What is up, SharkNation? Welcome to another episode of the SharkPod. We've got Mark Baker out there in Glenageary. Mark Baker, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Luke. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. We're in Greystones. The weather is getting a little bit chilly for the beginning of May. I don't understand what's happening there, but we're happy that the summer is coming up and all that good stuff. Today, we are doing something that we haven't done in a little while. We're going to do a breakdown of some advice about how to get rich. And we thought it might be good for the old clicks as well. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think we had good feedback from the last couple of what would you call them? Commentary podcasts with Matthew McConaughey. Who's the other one? Oh yeah, Arnie.
Arnold Schwarzenegger. We did that as well. Matthew McConaughey. So we're going to do Naval Ravikant today, and he is probably not going to look as good shirtless as Matthew McConaughey. That's the only thing for those.
Or Arnie.
Or Arnie, for that matter. So we're taking it down. Maybe taking it down a notch in the body department, but definitely kicking it up in the mind for sure. So we're going to do that, which is going to be great. But how have you been getting on the last couple of weeks anyway? How's business? How's life?
Good. Business has been good. I think it's good all around. Well, unless you're in the sectors that have been directly affected by COVID, travel and hospitality and stuff. But once the vaccine was announced, what was it, Q4 last year or whatever? It's actually people have been, when it comes to recruitment and moving jobs and stuff, they've been okay with moving jobs, not afraid to kind of leave their current job, or the job market has picked up hugely. So it's actually pretty, like, apart from the certain sectors, it's similar to pre-COVID times at the moment. So light at the end of the tunnel.
I feel like there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel because this week marks our first week, or our a year anniversary from our post COVID business cast that we did last year. That was a whole year ago, where we came up with 20 ideas or something. It was over 2 hours,
and we implemented none of them.
The length of that, Mark, is from some of the listeners.
I'm just laughing that we didn't implement any, but maybe somebody did out there. So feel free to let us know.
Absolutely, because there was some guys that were unemployed in Offaly that reached out to me, and they said that they were going to do some of the one or two of the ideas that we come up with. So I haven't heard of them since. Maybe they're rich now and they're too good for me. Maybe that's the problem. But like I said, the vaccine is going to be interesting. Like, I think I can't wait for things to get back and all that good stuff. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the scientist was saying the vaccines won't solve the problem here. There's it's going to be all these variants, and this is something that everyone's acting like this is the end. I'm like, we need to lock that guy up. Don't let him talk anymore. His time is over. That's why he's trying to be on the radio more.
Yeah, lockdowns will have a different meaning. Certain people who are talking rubbish, they'll be the one locked down.
I like it. Okay, cool. So to introduce our virtual guest, Naval Ravikant, he is an investor from Silicon Valley. He was born in India. He is he kind of styles, I don't know if he styles himself, but he comes across as kind of like a guru, a deep thinker, someone who has made a success out of his career in Silicon Valley without being one of the ones that is on everyone's mind. The Jeff Bezos. I know he was from Seattle, but all of the big hitters out of Silicon Valley. He wouldn't be on those types of lists, but he's an investor in stuff like Uber, Twitter, stuff like that. He also started a company called AngelList, which AngelList, it seems like the simplest plan in the world. Him and his friend had started a blog about how Silicon Valley worked and how to raise funds and stuff like that. And a lot of people with good ideas were contacting them, and a lot of angel investors were contacting them saying, can you put us in touch with people with good ideas? So they came up with AngelList.co, which is a place where people with good ideas can go meet people with money, and then they get a middleman fee or something like that. I googled their business model. I couldn't actually figure it out exactly what it is, but I'd imagine it's some sort of commission or some sort of, they get a deal brokerage fee, something like that. He's been on Tim Ferriss's podcast multiple times. He's been on Joe Rogan, actually had him on.
Really?
Stage, yeah. Yeah. So he's big on Twitter. The thing, what we're going to do today is we're going to break down his guide to how to get rich. I would recommend this to any kind of any person starting out in their career, or kind of somebody who's mid-career who isn't rich yet. Once you go through this 3 hour, I think it's a 3.5 hour podcast based on a tweet storm that he did about all the rules about getting rich, using all the experience that he has working with investors, working with startup founders and stuff like that. So he has a lot of experience, and what he's done is he did a podcast based on that tweet storm, and we've got it kind of chopped up here with our favorite rules, and that's kind of it. We're going to go through that. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I think I actually don't know, for full disclosure, I don't know much about him, and I probably know a lot more since you just told me, but I have listened to all the clips. I think it's good for anyone who, as you said, who's kind of early on in their career, and also somebody who is kind of maybe been working hard, putting all the effort in, thinking they've been doing the right things, and it hasn't been paying off for one reason or another. It might be the definition of insanity to keep doing what they're doing. So to think outside the box by listening to this, it's almost like a few secrets that they're obviously out there, but like not secrets, but maybe some things that people haven't thought of, that might completely change the way their course of action.
Especially, there's a few things in here where it's definitely not taught at schools when they're talking about the career design and what you're going to do with your life. It's like there's no one to step in when you're getting your career going as a coach and say, stop doing that. That's what you need. That would be amazing. Say if you were, if it was like me, where I had no fit for working in an investment bank. If someone was there from the first week and say, I could be a sounding, or they could be a sounding board for me, and I could go tell them what it's like, and they'd be like, well, don't do that because there's no leverage. Don't do that.
But that is for a lot of people, though. That's the problem. So that personal coach, it's almost like a personal coach, but who can afford a personal coach when they're on, 30 grand a year? But it's almost, you need someone to know you to be able to tell you this isn't for you, and you know it.
Yeah.
But I'm also telling you. So, there's two people. So go to Canada.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I did. And I was poor there when I first arrived, but then we clawed my way out of there. But anyway, so yeah, I think that's important as well. And we're like, I know it's going to get a lot of clicks, a lot of downloads, because how to get rich is always an interesting thing. But I mean, you're a rich man in so many ways, a beautiful family, your own business, all that type of stuff. But like, what's rich to you? Is just being able to do whatever you want? What would you say? Yeah, I'm rich now.
I would. That's a good question. I think to be able to get up every day and actually look forward to what you're doing day to day. Obviously to be surrounded with, healthy family and all that is number one, and safety and all that. But yeah, to get up every morning and not actually dread going to work, I think is a huge thing. But also day to day, but also long term, to have something to look forward to. So you might be in a job that you kind of like it day to day, but in the back of your head, you don't know where you're going to be in 5 to 10 years, and you're probably going to be in the same position. So it's actually knowing that my potential in a career or business is actually there's no lid, there's no cap on it. Do you know what I mean? There's no roof. So that makes me happy to know that the sky's the limit.
Okay.
But there is certain things you can do, and the sky is certainly not the limit. So for me, it's that kind of anything is possible type of thing. If it happens, it doesn't matter, but it's possible.
Okay,
does that make sense?
No, it does make sense for sure. For me, it's more like over the last couple of years, I've been making as much or more from investments, basically. So like either that's owning a property, selling it, owning stocks and stuff like that. And I see that the money that you make from that it's not fair. And I think I like to be in a position where I get wealthier in an asymmetrical relationship to how much effort I put in. Do you know? I think I think if you're making more money than like over the last year, I've made far more money in investments and stuff like that than I did working in Davy every day. Completely passive is the wrong word, because you have to work to get those assets. So it's not really passive income, but it's something that it just means that if I ever needed money, I can liquidate those assets and I can just get whatever I need. I think that's richness. So when it's kind of like the the rich dad, poor dad quadrant, if you're getting money from investments or your investments are becoming more valuable and you didn't put any hours into that, I think that's kind of where it starts to tip over. And if you're making more money from investments than from wages, I think that's rich.
Yeah. Revenue generating assets is essentially what people need.
Yeah.
Or at least assets, whatever you're working, it's compounding in an asset, if that makes sense, as opposed to a real transactional, right? I've earned $3,000 this month, down to zero, $3,000 next month, down to zero,
And maybe to avoid depreciating assets as well. That's why, like, I the fancy
depreciating assets. Is that it? Yeah.
Depreciating assets.
Like,
so don't buy those. That's what I was thinking. Like,
yeah, obviously the car is the big one, isn't it? Like that.
Yeah, I often
people just can't get past that.
It's like, and if you want to spend your money on a car, that's fine. But if you're talking about, I don't know. I often say to you, I see some really nice cars going around Greystone, thinking, how much do they have to earn a year to buy that?
Yeah. I think this human nature for some reason is when you do earn more money, or grow your assets, you want to live to those means. So you need a bigger car, and your cash flow is still as tight as it was when you were actually had less money, if that makes sense. So we always want the bigger thing. And I think he actually talks about that. So I won't jump ahead.
Yeah, you're a step on Paul's toes there. And let's bang into the first one here, because we could talk about our philosophical even kind of take on being rich. But let's have a listen to see what he says about some of these rules here. So the first one is that there is no business like show business. No, he doesn't say that. There's no skill, actual skill called business. So it's funny because, a lot of people out there doing BComs, Bachelor of Commerce and stuff like that. Then they come out and they're like, how come I'm not starting on 40 grand? I've got a degree, but you've got no skill. So let's have a listen to see what he has to say about that.
Business to me is bottom of the barrel. There's no actual skill called business. It's too generic of a thing. It's like a skill called relating to humans. That's not a skill. It's too broad. So a lot of what goes on in business schools, and there's some very intelligent stuff taught in business schools. I don't mean to distract from them completely, but some of the stuff that's taught in business school is essentially just anecdotes. They call it case studies, but it's just anecdotes. And they're trying to help you pattern match by throwing lots of data points at you. But the reality is you'll never understand them fully until you're actually in that position yourself. Even then, you will find that basic concepts from game theory and psychology and ethics and mathematics and computers and logic will serve you much, much better. So I would focus on the foundations. I would focus with a science bent. I would develop a love for reading, including by reading so-called junk food that you're not supposed to read. You don't have to read the classics. That is the foundation for your self-education.
What did you mean when you said that doing is faster than watching?
When it comes to your learning curve, if you want to optimize your learning curve, one of the reasons why I don't love podcasts, even though I'm a generator of podcasts, is that I like to consume my information very quickly. And now I'm a good reader, a fast reader, and I can read very fast, but I can only listen at a certain speed. I know people listen to 2x, 3x, but everyone sounds like a chipmunk. And it's hard to go back. It's hard to highlight. It's hard to pinpoint snippets and save them in your notebook and so on. Similarly, a lot of people think they can become really skilled at something by watching others do it, or even by reading about others doing it. And going back to business school case studies, that's a classic example. They study other people's businesses, but in reality, you're going to learn a lot more about running a business by operating your own lemonade stand or equivalent, or even opening a little retail store down the street. That is how you're going to learn on the job, because a lot of the subtleties don't express themselves until you're actually running the business. For example, everyone's now into mental models these days, right? You go to Farnham Street, you go to Poor Charlie's Almanac, and you can learn all the different mental models. But which ones matter more? Which ones do you apply more often? Which ones matter in which circumstances? That's actually the hard part. For example, my personal learning has been that the principal agent problem drives so much in this world. It's an incentives problem. I've learned that tit for tat, iterated prisoner's dilemma, is the piece of game theory that is worth knowing the most. You can literally almost put down the game theory book after that. By the way, the best way to learn game theory is to play lots of games. I never even read game theory books. I consider myself extremely good at game theory. I've never opened up a game theory book and found a result in there where I was like, oh yeah, that's common sense to me. because the reason is I just grew up playing all kinds of games and I ran into all kinds of corner cases with all kinds of friends. And so it's just second nature to me. So you can always learn better by doing on the job.
What do you think, Mark? That's number one. Business isn't really a skill to be learned. What do you think?
Yeah, it's too broad of a term. It's way too broad. Commerce is another word for business, but commerce is actually probably less broad in that, like, e-commerce is quite specific.
Buying and selling.
Yeah. But business could be anything. What do people say when someone knows that somebody is kind of well off, but they don't really know what their job is and they know they own business? They're a businessman.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't want to think of actually what do they do. It's a coverall.
This one really, like, maybe this wasn't the most striking one, or insightful one for a lot of people that are listening about, we're going to go into some kind of deeper concepts in a minute, but I thought it was really interesting because doing is faster than watching is such an interesting concept, because like right now I'm actually doing a Harvard Business School course online, right? And it feels like it's important. Kind of way, like they've got really good materials. We're going through these case studies, where commenting on, oh, what should that manager do here? Or the leader has this problem, and we're sitting around doing this. And I remember, like, if you're a bright person, you like doing that type of stuff because it makes you feel smart. But the stakes are low, so there's no learning. If there's no, like we talked about this before, if there's no stakes, nothing happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no skin in the game. There's no the learning curve is a lot slower, and in business, I did a business degree, an entrepreneurship degree, for 4 years, and almost none of those people became entrepreneurs, even though they knew everything about how to. It was such a good course, like they taught us actually how to start businesses, work with Enterprise Ireland, like really, like they did their best, like, but if you start a lemonade stand or a garbage removal company for 4 years, you'd have a master's in business.
Yeah. Did they teach you how to manage your views on risk? How you deal with personal risk and the risk of starting a business and failing. Did they teach you resilience? You can't teach that.
No.
And they're the two biggest things to think about, really.
It's something to think about. So when people are, so I think the takeaway here would be, one, have skin in the game. So make sure that if you're going to be learning something, it's going to be a verb. You're going to be doing something, right? So if you want to learn, say, with your art, if you wanted to learn about owning an art gallery, we had a great chat with Owen O'Connor the other day, but it doesn't mean that you know how to
exactly
know as much as he does about owning and running an art gallery. And you probably have a good go at it because you've been in the industry for a long time, but I bet there'd be stuff there that you wouldn't get straight off the bat and you couldn't really read about.
Yeah, and that was a long form conversation as well, which you can actually learn quite a lot from. The first two things I thought of after listening to that clip was, so you learn more by doing than watching. I just thought of YouTube straight away, and I don't know why I do this. It's probably because I'm 35 now and I've experienced certain things. When I'm trying to learn something on YouTube, I stop the video and I try do it before I even finish what he's going to say or they're going to say. I don't know if you do that, like when you kind of I get the gist of it, and I go off and I'll try it first and I'll kind of break things as I go, and then I'll figure it. And I find that I learn way better that way as opposed to watching a 10-minute video then starting. I always start like 2 minutes in. Do you do that?
I do that as well, and I do it. I just thought it was me being impatient, but I did a Salesforce
that as well,
course where we had to be a Salesforce administrator, and I was doing the Udemy course of that, which is hilarious. If anyone wants to just get a job for 50 grand a year or 60 grand a year, do a 3-hour Udemy course, and you can be a Salesforce administrator. Skip the 4-year degree. So it's hilarious. The internet, the great equalizer.
Yeah.
But my point was, like, I would stop and then I'd go off for like a half an hour tinkering with the software, and then I'd come back and but I'm the same as well. So I think people they do misunderstand learning because it's not anyone's fault, I don't think, because when you're in school or in college, you sit there, you watch the person who knows what they're talking about. You take really bad notes that don't make any sense a couple of days later, and then you cram for the exam. That's what we've been taught learning is. It's not like my friend's a secondary school teacher. They said that the people are crying out for apprentices right now, and they have to go into the schools and try to get people to be apprentices. Imagine like going into like a fourth year student and saying, I can make you skilled at building houses. Do you know how many people, do you know how much people pay for houses? Or you can go to college, and that's what people want to do. They go get a degree in business, and they're starting from scratch 4 years later. This guy could do a business degree at night and be a builder or a electrician, start hiring electricians, get contracts for all these different apartment buildings for maintenance contracts. You could really.
Well, people have been do that, and they have been doing that for years, particularly when we were in school, and they've most of them have done really well.
Exactly, but this is my my point was my friend was saying that he couldn't get the kids to go to it. Like he couldn't, like they had no interest. And he's like, that's actually how you're gonna do well if you have
Sorry, and then the other thing I was thinking of was because of what I do, I see people who go off and do extra courses, and I don't mean courses, I mean PhDs, MBAs, higher diplomas, masters. And while they're doing that, there's somebody else, or let's say them, version 2, and who have gone on and continued to work for 2 years or whatever. And I know who's going to win at interview stage. It's the person that just continued to work and has more hands-on experience than someone. So I say, like, unless it's directly going to affect your career, or else you really want to do it just because people like learning and learning new things and stuff, but don't expect to get more money.
That's a hard one to take, especially for the MBA stuff, because
I'm sorry, and just to say, like, the kind of masters, kind of the degree masters, that's going to stand to you, like, and then you move into the workforce. That makes complete sense, or that you become a chartered accountant or whatever it might be. But it's that kind of further into your career stuff, which is all tougher to do, bigger leap to do. Like you some people have families and they're doing it, it's something to think about,
I sometimes when I think about the PhD thing, because I even thought about doing a PhD because I was coming out of college and there was no jobs at the time, and I was like, I could be a lecturer and stuff like that. Like the amount of hoops they have to jump through to become, a success in academia, or like if you got a PhD in psychology, that might help you be a better salesperson, but it probably won't. If you went door to door for a week selling aircom phone watch, you'd be a better salesperson than do you know what I mean? So it's got to be as in something that's a sellable skill, and doesn't have to be. So sometimes with the MBA thing, I think, okay, most of the people that do an MBA are either stuck in their career and they say, I'll do this, and then they'll like me, I'll do this, then they'll open all the doors for me. That's actually not the case. That type of person is not going to get the doors open.
No, I have seen people do very well after doing MBAs. I really have, but I personally think those people would have done well anyway. That's my opinion.
So I think it's not really I think unless you're going there I think a lot of people do the €60,000 MBAs because they'll meet people who have put £60,000 into the pot to be there, and they're gonna start businesses together. They're going to
I have to say, somebody did. I don't know if it was on this podcast. Definitely, a couple of people have said it to me that was the biggest thing that came out of that MBA was the connections.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that may be the case as well. So, but if you're doing an MBA at like IBAT college or whatever, I'm not having to go at them. I'm just saying, if it's not kind of a brand name, one of the big ones on the Financial Times list of MBAs, I don't think it's worth that much money. But anyway, that's my opinion. The next one we have is learn to sell, learn to build. Love this one. Take it away, Naval.
Combining skills. You said that you should learn to sell, learn to build. If you can do both, you will be unstoppable.
This is a very broad category now, but it's two broad categories. One is building the product, which is hard, and it's multivariate. That can include design, that can include development, that can include manufacturing, logistics, procurement, It could even be designing and operating a service. It has many, many definitions, but in every industry, there is a definition of the builder. In our tech industry, that's the CTO, it's the programmer, it's the software engineer, hardware engineer. But, even in like a laundry business, it could be the person who's building the laundry service, who is making the trains run on time, who's making sure all the clothes end up in the right place at the right time, and so on. Then the other side of it is the sales side. Again, selling has a very broad definition. Selling doesn't necessarily just mean selling individual customers, but it could mean marketing. It could mean communicating. It could mean recruiting. It could mean raising money. It could mean inspiring people. It could mean doing PR. So it's a broad umbrella category. So generally, the Silicon Valley startup model tends to work best. It's not the only way, but it is probably the most common way. When you have two founders, one of whom is world-class at sales and one of whom is world-class at building. An example is, of course, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak with Apple. Gates and Allen probably had similar responsibility early on with Microsoft. Larry and Sergey, probably broke down along those lines, although it's a little different there because that was a very technical product delivered to end users through a simple interface. But generally, you will see this pattern repeated over and over. There's a builder and there's a seller. There's a CEO and CTO combo. And venture and technology investors are almost trained to look for this combo whenever possible. It's sort of the magic combination. The ultimate is when one individual can do both. That's when you get true superpowers. That's when you get people who can create entire industries. The living example is Elon Musk. He may not necessarily be building the rockets himself, but he understands enough that he actually makes technical contributions. He understands the technology well enough that no one's going to snow him on it. And he's not running around making claims that he doesn't think he can eventually deliver. He may be optimistic in the timelines, but he thinks it's within reasonableness of delivery. Even Steve Jobs developed enough product skills and was involved enough in the product that he also operated in both of these domains. Larry Ellison started as a programmer and I think wrote the first version of Oracle or was actually heavily involved in it. Mark Andreessen was also in this domain. He may not have had enough confidence in his sales skills, but he was the programmer who wrote Netscape Navigator, a big chunk of it. So I think the real giants in any field are the people who can both build and sell.
Mark Baker, what do you think? Building and selling?
Yeah, I think we've said it before. One of the biggest things is being able to sell. Like the build thing is an obvious one. Probably more people, I don't know, I was going to say more people are builders than sellers. What would you say?
I think that a lot of people don't have either skill. They're on the sidelines a lot. They're working with something that someone has built, and they're not getting the rewards of being a salesperson either. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not in between the product or service and the customer, so they're not getting the commission. That's how sales works. You put yourself in between the end user and the service or product. That's all you have to do. I was on a call recently with a new salesperson in work, and I was trying to get that kind of concept across, where it's not so sales skills is important, but just being the skill is getting yourself to a position where you're the gatekeeper to product or service. Eventually, people will need, if there's a market for it, they will need that product or service. They'll come through you. You take your cut. That's what sales is. When people think about sales, they think, "Oh, I've got to be really, really charismatic. I've got to be someone maybe who's a bit of an arsehole as well, a hard-nosed businessman." I don't think I'm any of those things. I think that I can figure out angles that people can't see with business problems. So I can come up with innovative solutions using, in my case, software to solve a business problem that sometimes the business people that I'm selling to didn't even see. That's what I'm doing. I'm not trying, there's no, the always be closing manuals and stuff like that. I think that they're like, I know no one likes being sold to.
It's very one-dimensional to think like that.
It's so in some ways, if you are a builder, it kind of goes back to our first point about the doing rather than watching. I think it's going to be like, it's a difficult thing to go from a programmer who's built a good app to change your personality or change your way of thinking to become a salesperson. Probably impossible to do it the other way.
Yeah, it is interesting the way you said that a salesperson will find it more difficult to be a builder. So almost I think he recommends not even bothering.
He actually does. And later in the clip, he says, if you're
Yeah.
a salesperson, stick with that. If you're a builder, you can kind of learn the
Yes.
sales piece. I think here, and I think he comes across like he's disparaging salespeople in that way, but I don't think that he is. I think that he's saying a lot of people who are world class at sales will sit down at a problem, and they say the mindset is kind of almost coin operated. It's like, well, I could sit down here and build this, or someone else can build it, and I can give them the money for it. I'll sell it. Why would I build it? That's the that's, do you know what I mean? Kind of, that's the salesperson mindset. Is like, okay, I need a product to sell. I don't have the product. I've got an idea. Someone can build it. I'll go sell it. You know.
They obviously think their time is more valuable on the sales side because sales is so important. How many excellent products, and I've built products, whether it be a website or whatever, and had it perfect, and then it was like, right, where's the customers? It's so hard to find customers, to get people to your product. And who does that? A salesperson. And sales is just as broad a term as business, for that matter.
Yeah.
So I don't. Yeah, I would prefer to be a salesperson. I think I'm more of a builder who is kind of learning sales, and I've definitely focused more on that when I'm trying to learn stuff. It's like how to sell more, and not in a salesy type of way. Obviously, it's a broad term. But the obvious thing is, if you're going into business, I would recommend, if you are a salesperson, double down on that and find a builder.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like
I've never gone it on my own. Well, I have with the art, and I was definitely a builder with the art, a creator, all that kind of stuff. And just look, I've sold tons of paintings, but like the sales part, especially when it's your product, is actually quite hard to sell you as a product. It's quite cringeworthy almost.
Yeah,
I would just way more easily sell a product than myself. Put it that way.
Yeah, if they scrutinize the product, it doesn't. You can't take it personally. Like if it's like, oh, you say you're an artist. You know,
I don't like your painting.
Yeah.
Oh, best.
I'm doing my best there. Okay, so just because we both got kids now, what would you prefer your kids to be, a builder or a seller, or both? They have time to do both, which is a great thing. Do you know?
Yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, the answer is both.
Yeah,
but I think that's just all-consuming when you're trying to be both, and I personally know that. So a seller, I think. But no. I would actually say whatever matches their personality best.
Okay,
that's so for my 9-year-old, I would say probably a builder, and the other one may be a builder as well. Actually, now that I think of it, so maybe there are two builders.
Well, a couple 1-2 builders out there in the baker. I think. I mean, I know Shay's only 5 months old, but he'd buy and sell you. Like I think he's got the
smile anyway.
He's got the smile. He's got the stuff. He's going to be selling things. So I think I won't have with the kids. I don't know if you have a choice anyway. But my point is, for me, either don't be, if you're trying to be both, don't be a shitty both. Be one or the other. Or do you mean so?
Yeah.
I don't know how to build software, for example. So I could learn computer science at night. I could be 5 years down the road, and I would be able to put together, workable apps and connect it to databases, and build workflows with APIs, all that type of stuff. I would be able to do it, and that's the thing. Technology isn't actually that hard. Like, it gets more simple.
That's a big statement.
Technology just isn't that hard. I've got on rants, I think, on this podcast before about, it's not like you can actually build a career in tech and not really be that good. A lot of the stuff is like test engineering and stuff like that. I mean, it's very, you could teach people how to do it, and people do. That's what these companies do. When you do computer science, you go into the company as X position, and they just teach you how to do that. Do you know what I mean? It's not, but I'm talking about those people who are bringing ideas to life and fixing problems.
There's a big debate as to, should you focus on your weaknesses and try and improve them, or should you double down on your strengths? In my business, we double down on our strengths and tinker around with our weaknesses, but don't waste too much time on them.
I also think you either love the sales part, or it's hard to learn to love it, I think. Like I there's lots of ups and downs when you're selling things. Like no one's on defense when you're trying to build something. That's
Yes.
what I think. And not having defense, no one's trying to stop you from building. You just spend all the time you want building a brilliant product, or but I quite like the excitement of winning big deals. We lost a huge deal last month. It really stung.
Yeah.
But that's part of the game,
But also that's not to get too philosophical, but that's life. So there is other benefits, byproducts of actually learning how to sell and being in sales, even for a little bit of time,
I think, and in the long term, when you're in the sales, when you're selling something, when you're selling is kind of, like I said, you're putting yourself in between the customer and the product. In the long run, you do very well.
Yeah.
Eventually you'll be talking to people who you can solve their problem. They've got cash on the hip. They don't want to negotiate. They just want to take it. And I think a lot of people who go into, who aren't builders, go into tech sales, and the first 6 months, it doesn't go very well. And they're like, I can't do this for 20 years. But if they stayed for 2 years, every single month they'll hit the target. They're making 2 or 3 times more than they would have been in another area. Do you know, that's the way you'll be rewarded. Do you know?
Yeah.
It's like strikers in football. They get paid the most, I think. I don't know much about football.
Yeah, no, they I don't know, actually. Maybe they don't, but I'd imagine they get paid better than a goalkeeper, put it that way.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So here's an interesting one. So play long-term games. So this is something that, again, if you're younger, it's an easier thing to do. But even if you're older, I've known people who kind of jump around from different jobs. I was that person for a long time, and just leave just before the knowledge that they're gaining starts actually valuable, and let's have a look at this one here.
A little bit about what industries you should think about working in, what kind of job you should have, and who you might want to work with. So you said one should pick an industry where you can play long-term games with long-term people. Why?
Yeah, this is an insight into what makes Silicon Valley work and what makes high-trust societies work. Essentially, all the benefits in life come from compound interest, whether it's in relationships or making money or in learning. So compound interest is a marvelous force where it's like, you start out with 1x what you have. And then if you increase 20% a year for 30 years, it's not that you got 30 years times 20% added on. It was compounding. So it just grew and grew and grew until you suddenly got a massive amount of whatever it is, whether it's goodwill or love or relationships or money. So I think compound interest is a very important force. So you have to be able to play a long-term game. And long-term games are good, not just for compound interest, they're also good for trust. If you look at Prisoner's Dilemma type games, the solution to Prisoner's Dilemma is tit for tat, which is I'm just going to do to you what you did last time to me with some forgiveness in case there was a mistake made. But that only works in an iterated Prisoner's Dilemma. In other words, if we play the game multiple times. So if you're in a situation, like, for example, you're in Silicon Valley where people are doing business with each other and they know each other, they trust each other, then they do right by each other because they know this person will be around for the next game. Now, of course, that doesn't always work because you can make so much money in one move in Silicon Valley. Sometimes people betray each other because they're just like, I'm going to get rich enough off this that I don't care. So there can be exceptions to all these circumstances. But essentially, if you want to be successful, you have to work with other people and you have to figure out who can you trust and who can you trust over a long, long period of time that you can just keep playing the game with them so that compound interest and high trust will make it easier to play the game and will let you collect the major rewards, which are usually at the end of the cycle. So for example, Warren Buffett has done really well as an investor in the US stock market. But the biggest reason he could do that was because the US stock market has been stable and around and didn't get, for example, seized by the government during a bad administration, or the US didn't plunge into some war. The underlying platform didn't get destroyed. So in his case, he was playing a long-term game, and the trust came from the US stock market stability. In Silicon Valley, the trust comes from the network of people in the small geographic area that you figure out over time who you can work with and who you can't. If you keep switching locations, you keep switching groups, let's say you started out in the woodworking industry and you built up a network there and you're working hard, you're trying to build a product in the woodworking industry. And then suddenly another industry comes along that's adjacent but different, but you don't really know anybody in it and you want to dive in and make money there. If you keep hopping from industry to, no, actually I need to open a line of electric car stations for electric car refueling. That might make sense. It might be the best opportunity, but every time you reset, every time you wander out of where you built your network, you're going to be starting from scratch. You're not going to know who to trust. They're not going to trust you. There are also industries in which people are transient by definition. They're always kind of coming in and going out. Politics is an example of that, right? In politics, new people are being elected. You see in politics that when you have a lot of old timers, like the Senate, people who've been around for a long time and they've been career politicians, yeah, there's a lot of downside to career politicians, like corruption, but an upside is they actually get deals done with each other because they know the other person is going to be in the same position 10 years from now, and they're going to keep dealing with them. So they might as well learn how to cooperate. Whereas every time you get like a new incoming freshman class in the House of Representatives, which turns over every 2 years, the big wave election, nothing gets done because there's a lot of fighting. Because I just got here. I don't know you. I don't know if you're going to be around. Why should I work with you? Rather than just trying to do whatever I think is right. So it's important to pick an industry where you can play long-term games and with long-term people. So those people have to signal that they're going to be around for a long time, that they're ethical, and their ethics are visible through their actions.
In a long-term game, it seems that everybody is making each other rich. And in a short-term game, it seems like everybody is making themselves rich.
So Mark Baker, so they mentioned a few times in that the kind of game theory, the prisoner's dilemma, John Nash, all that type of stuff. Have you ever come across that type of
No,
literature?
No, I haven't actually.
So if anybody ever see the movie A Beautiful Mind by with Russell Crowe?
I haven't seen it.
It's a great movie, Mark. That's the homework for the long weekend here. It's really good. So John Nash, he was a guy who developed the game theory, it's called. Game theory sounds great, and when you're in college and you're going to do game theory and as a course, you're like, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to be able to like outdo people, outmaneuver people, and stuff like that. And there's a element of that in the theory as well. But basically, John Nash was a mathematician who I believe lost his mind in the end because he was just very bright. He's part of the Manhattan Project. Or not the Manhattan. I don't know if it was the Manhattan Project, which is the one where they're building the nuclear bomb. I think he was involved anyway in the nuclear planning for fighting Russia and during the Cold War. So really, really interesting guy. He came up with something called the prisoner's dilemma, right? Where you and me have been arrested. I don't know if we've got time to go into this. I think people enjoy this though, right? Me and you have been arrested. Okay.
Fraud, probably.
Fraud, could be anything. Jesus, there's a few. I remember Matthew McConaughey says, "Don't leave crumbs." I've been fucking scoffing, cookies for a long time. I wouldn't be hard to find, Mark. Right. So me and you have been arrested, fraud, embezzlement, something like that, something white collar.
Yeah.
And we've been put in a room, and they're interrogating us, right? All right. And if so, here's the outcomes. We both say nothing, right? We say we don't say he did it or I did it or whatever. So if we both say nothing, we get 5 years in prison because they're just gonna say, okay, we don't know who did it, so you're both guilty.
Yeah.
Okay. If you say that I did it and I say that you did it, we get 10 years. All right. So if we both screw each other over, we get 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
If we both say that we didn't do it, I don't know. I'm having to get lost here.
No, we already said that
Yeah.
Both of us remain silent. We blame each other.
Yeah.
Or we admit.
One of us, this is the third bit. One of us doesn't admit to anything, but the other one blames us. That person gets off, and the person gets 7.5 years.
Okay.
Right? So when you do them, so the good thing about this kind of relationship is there's a mathematical equation to this game theory where there's a expected value outcome for all of the decisions. So in game theory, like in theory, you'll be able to figure out exactly what you should do. It's a decision-making technique. So you figure out exactly what you should do based on the expected outcome, based on the probability of what the outcomes might be. So basically, in the prisoner's dilemma, and people have run with this idea because it kind of, for a certain type of person, it proves how people are. But the kind of punchline here is the best thing you can do is screw your friend.
Okay.
Because if you screw him and he screws you, you both get X amount of years anyway. But if you don't screw him and he screws you, he gets off and you go to jail for a long time.
Yeah.
And trust him not to say anything.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of the human punchline, is that you're always better off screwing over somebody. That's what people say, but that's not actually what. That's not what
you'd recommend.
No, but I mean, in this case, and
I wouldn't write you out just in case, just to let you know.
I wouldn't say
I'm saying that.
And they couldn't get anything out. I don't know. We'll see. But the thing is, that's only the prisoner's dilemma only applies to finite games. So if it's a once-off, it's you can expect people to screw you over, basically. So say a situation where there's going to be no comeback. Say if you're on holiday, I've seen you guys. You came, you're in Santa Ponza again. Okay, a favorite haunt of you guys, right? And you're in Santa Ponza, and a guy comes up to you and he's selling you a pair of Ray-Bans. Okay, the likelihood is his after sales service is not going to be great. You should expect that. You should expect to be screwed over because there's no comeback. There's no long-term game here. Yeah. So it's something to keep in mind if you're going to make a decision and say, will this person benefit from a long-term relationship with me or not? And if it's not, you shouldn't take that option.
Yeah. Well, that's why in recruitment, there's certain companies that don't do well because of how they treat people. They try to put them into the job that isn't suitable for them. They whatever they say to get them in, and we've never been like that. And that's not how I've learned. In recruitment, in the long term, it's best for everybody to be honest all the time. Do your best for everybody. Take the hits when you could squeeze something in the door. Just take the hit and move on, and be confident in the fact that all the people that you dealt with in that situation will come back to you for further business. They'll come back to you when they're moving their job the next time. They'll recommend their friends to you. So long term, it works to be honest. So that kind of proves that point. Whereas if you're never going to work with that person ever again, they disappear off the face of the earth. Therefore, you could be tempted to just do that one transaction, not unethically or whatever it may be.
And do you think that you'd be tempted if it was just once off?
Because it's a people thing, I don't, and the way I am, I don't think so. I don't think I could stomach that. But if it was businesses, business to business, I think it's different.
It's an interesting one. Like, it's the infinite game. So basically, I feel like the advice here is to make sure that you're playing in a long-term game where we're going to be making money together, or we're going to be investing together, or this is something that's going to be a 10-year, 15-year play. So
do you think if you're doing business in Dublin or a small town or a big town with a small feel to it, do you think I think it's always advisable to do the best thing and treat it long term, because everything is so connected.
Yes, exactly.
It'll come back to you. I think that. I think maybe if you're doing business internationally from Dublin, over the internet, never meeting anybody, it's different.
Yeah, for sure.
But a bad deal will come back to you, I think.
Especially if you're not the principal. So if you're just an agent that Al talks about, where you're just a worker, you get a commission if they buy. You don't care how they get on with that product or service afterwards, which is the case when you're doing international sales a lot of the time. If I'm selling to somebody in Dubai, I mean, I care that it goes well, and I don't want them to waste their money. There's been no deals. You couldn't find a deal that I've done where that was the case, where it was screw them over. But there is a temptation to say, is this the best fit? I mean, they can't come and knock on my door.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? They don't know who I am.
Yeah, but I don't. As a long-term play for an individual who wants to go back to it to get rich, I think those kind of one-off transactional stuff will might get you, decent amount of wealth, but long term, you're not really building anything. Also, if it's all about compounding to get rich, to succeed, to build something really big, it's all about compounding. You have to be careful as to what asset you actually choose for that compound growth. Say you go into a job and he's saying stay long term with long term people. Like if you're in a job and you're saying, right, I'm going to stay here for life because I love all these people and they're great people, I'm going to build my career here. There's variables there. People will leave. The business could go bankrupt. So I don't think it doesn't apply to everything.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
I've been in that situation before, like in Canada. One of my kind of mentors one day just said he was leaving, and I was like, it changed my plans because I thought we were going to do this long term thing. Then he goes,
yeah.
So I think you're right. There's a risk involved if you're doing that, and I think it's more what he's talking about there is more akin to your business because it is a local thing, and if you're building someone you want to stay, maybe staying in the same industry rather. I think his point was more like we all know people who are, this week that they're selling. They've got an online shoe business. Next week it's Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Next week,
I think that's okay if you've actually built a business and become an expert in something, and are actually happy that you've achieved something big and you can move on. You see that all the time. Look at Norman Crowley. He builds different businesses.
Yeah,
there might be adjacent in some way, but
he's doing. Remember, it was kind of the same people involved. Remember, you were saying that's kind of
yeah. So I'm saying the asset, if you're an employee, the asset isn't necessarily the job. The asset to you is actually the people, the mentor that you can get there. Well, actually, he or she could bring you with them to the next job, or in 10 years time when you want that job, so and so is actually the head of that now because I had such a great relationship with that person. There's the thing that I can leverage, or it might be the skill set or whatever, but I don't necessarily think the asset is the job, if that makes sense. I don't know.
I know what you're trying to say though. I think you could be you almost fool yourself into non-action going, oh, I'm playing the game. I'm getting rich like this because I'm staying where I'm at. But I don't think that's what he's trying to say. Make sure where you're staying is something that's going to make you rich in the long term.
Yeah, but you could be a financial accountant in a company and there might be no progression. And you say, no, I'm sticking to it. This is the asset that I've chose to compound every year. I'm a year more experienced. But you're actually a year more experienced. If it's one of those jobs, you might be a year more experienced in the same thing repetitively over and over again. Yeah. You're actually that's actually not going anywhere. So you might need to actually go to the next job, the next company to get a new set of skill sets to compound to the current skill set that you've been doing for the last 2 years.
Yeah, I like it. So keep the long-term focus, which is, I think that's the kind of takeaway there. If I was, giving advice to my little boy, I would say it would be great if you were the master of solid work projects. Like you're the guy. You've built businesses there. You're in. I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
I think good assets to think about, like to compound on, are skill sets and people.
Yeah. Here's actually a good example of the skill set that you mentioned there. The guy who's the CEO of the company I worked for in Canada, he started a business doing payment software, sold that on IPO, started another payment software that was kind of more better user experience kind of for the mid-market, sold that. Then he started a Bitcoin exchange with the same type of principles that you can buy and sell things through kind of payment software. So he's kind of compounding that for the long term. It's not exactly the same market.
Yeah, they're slightly adjacent. It's like me as a qualified accountant in finance. It wasn't for me long term. I didn't think I was going to be the best accountant in the world, so I pivoted slightly into finance recruitment. That's a perfect example. So I'm still staying in the game, still all the same people involved.
Yeah.
But it's a completely different business.
It must be such an asset when they talk to you and they think that you're a recruiter by trade, and then you're like, I used to work in Deloitte as well. I know how you feel. I think that just takes a weight off their shoulders. I'd say I know.
Yeah, well, that's how I felt when I was looking for a job. I trusted people who were professionals and who had been there and done it, who weren't just telling me what it was like, because I met people who told me what it was like, and they hadn't got a clue because I was an accountant, you know.
I got a couple of recruiter emails this week, and it's just so far off what I'm. It's evident from the first time that they don't really know what I do for a living.
Yeah, look, there's different ways of doing selling things, you know.
Yeah.
Spray and pray, you know, become an expert, advise, you know, there's different ways of doing it.
Let's keep this ball rolling. We are getting rich here today on the SharkPod,
which I thought was pretty interesting, and I think you have your own on it. So the first tweet on accountability.
I love this one, accountability and leverage. This one's great.
Was embrace accountability and take business risks under your own name. Society will reward you with responsibility, equity, and leverage.
Yeah. So to get rich, you're going to need leverage.
We could stop it right there. There's a lot more to listen to, but that's the key takeaway today. If you can do stuff under your own name, that is the most important thing. Like so many, how hard is that? And how many people say, I'd love to join a startup. I don't want it under my own name. I'd love to, because when you put yourself out there, but society is going to reward you with more stuff. And what a lesson to tell children.
Well, I've experienced it, and it's 100% true. There's no doubt about it. The flip side to that, if that is true, okay, well, everybody will do it, but they don't. So why don't they? It's because of the flip side, which is society will crush you if you get it wrong, if you fail. But they don't, because we're not cave people anymore. You won't get kicked out of the tribe for doing something silly. You don't go to debtor's prison anymore,
So let's see what he says.
And leverage comes in labor, comes in capital, or it can come through code or media. But most of these, like labor and capital, people have to give to you. For labor, somebody has to follow you. For capital, somebody has to give you money or assets to manage or machines. So to get these things, you have to build up credibility, and you have to do those under your own name as much as possible, which is risky. So accountability is a double-edged thing. It allows you to take credit when things go well and to bear the brunt of the failure when things go badly. So in that sense, people who are stamping their names on things aren't foolish. They're just confident. Maybe it turns out to be foolish in the end. But if you look at a Kanye or an Oprah or a Trump or an Elon or anyone like that, these people can get rich just off their name because their name is such powerful branding. Regardless of what you think of Trump, you have to realize that the guy was among the best in the world at just branding his name. Why would you go to Trump Casino? It used to be because of Trump. Why would you go to Trump Tower? Because of Trump. When it came time to vote, I think there were a lot of voters who just went in and said Trump. They recognized the name. So the name recognition paid off. Same thing with Oprah. She puts her brand on something, her name on something, and it flies off the shelves, and it's like instant validator. But these people also take risks for putting their name out there. Obviously, Trump is now probably hated by half or more than half of the country and by a big chunk of the world because he sticks his name out there. By putting your name out there, you become a celebrity, and fame has many, many downsides. It's better to be anonymous and rich than to be poor and famous, but even famous and rich has a lot of downsides associated with it. You're always in the public eye. So accountability is quite important. When you're working to build a product, or you're working in a team, or you're working in a business, we are constantly drummed into our heads how important it is to be part of a team. And absolutely agree with that. A lot of our training socially is telling us to not stick our necks out of the crowd. There's a saying that I hear from my Australian friends that like the tall poppy gets cut, right? Don't stick your neck out. But I would say that actually a really, really well-functioning team is small and has clear accountability for each of the different portions. Like, so you can say, okay, this person is responsible for building the product. This person is responsible for the messaging. This person is responsible for raising money. This person is responsible for the pricing strategy and maybe the online advertising. So if somebody screws up, you know exactly who's responsible, while at the same time, if something goes really well, you also know exactly who's responsible. So if you have a small team and you have clearly delineated responsibilities, then you can still keep a very high level of accountability. And accountability is really important because when something succeeds or fails, if it fails, everybody points fingers at each other. And if it succeeds, everybody steps forward to take credit. And we've all had that experience when we were in school and we got like a group
assignment to do. And there were people in there, there were probably a few people in there who did a lot of the work. And then there were a few people who just did a lot of grandstanding or positioning to do the work. So we're all familiar with this from a childhood sense, but it's sort of uncomfortable to talk about. But clear accountability is important. Without accountability, you don't have incentives. Without accountability, you can't build credibility, but you take risk. So you take risk of failure, you take risk of humiliation, you take risk of failure under your own name, which, luckily in modern society, there's no more debtor's prison and people don't go to jail or get executed for losing other people's money. But we're still socially hardwired to not fail in public under our own names.
It's such an insightful thing, I think. Like, again, raising kids, if you can give them one thing, say, whatever you do, if you're doing something under your own name, it's just so more impressive than if you're part of a team. It's always even, I don't know, like people who do really well on teams if you're anonymous doing well, you might it's very difficult to be rich and anonymous unless you live in Greystones. I don't know what these people are doing.
It's called inheritance.
These mansions. What do they do for a living? I'm so interested. I walk around some of the really big houses in Greystones here. I'm like, what's their game?
Yeah. Even if you did inherit it, like, how are you upkeeping it?
Yeah, exactly. How did you not mess this up? Okay, so what do you think about that? Accountability, should that be something that should be on the map for somebody leaving school? Say, how can you get a job that you're accountable for the outcome? Like, are you just gonna? What do you want to do?
I think you don't just have to be. It doesn't just apply to kind of entrepreneurs and building businesses. I think if you want to succeed within a business as an employee, you have to be accountable. Put your name forward for things that might seem a little bit, or a project that's a bit risky. I'm sure you've experienced stuff like that before. It'll pay off. You learn so much from it, and people will trust you. People like people who aren't afraid to take risks. I think that as well. Because it's so hard to do. I think they think, Jesus, that person must know what they're doing. Whereas they just might be, blind ambition.
Yeah, you don't want to be like Bart Simpson when he thinks he's the smart one, then, and he keeps on putting up his hand, and then they're like, I haven't got one right all day. Sit down.
Yeah, so well, look, put the work in, but so many people put the work in and don't put their hand up for things, So if you're going to do all the work, be confident, take a few risks, take a small risk, just ease yourself into it, maybe. But yeah, accountability is. But if it pays off, it definitely pays off.
It's kind of like if we're talking about getting rich, the best way to get rich there, he was talking about leverage, and he was talking about like the leverage part for me is the most important part. The accountability is fine, but trying to figure out a way of the one-to-many approach rather than one-to-one. And I think if you are going to take on a project and work or something like that, it can be a bit one-to-one. You've put in X amount, you get X amount out because you're the one doing it. But if you have your own business and you can hire a sales team, now you've got leverage. Instead of making 100 calls a day, you can make 1,000 calls a day if you have 10 salespeople. That kind of way. So I think,
like you mentioned, the likes of Donald Trump, Oprah, when it comes to kind of doing stuff in your own name, the fact is, people will hate you. There is people who hate. We know half America hated Donald Trump. There's people who don't like Oprah. So you can't try to please everybody if you want to stand out. It's impossible. Who is just everybody thinks is great, So you have to be able to take the hits as well if you're going to put your hand up for things. And then there's becoming an expert and in your industry and being well known, and then there's also having that and being stuff gravitate towards you because of that, because you're putting yourself out there. But also online, there's like the online presence as well. So you could be, there's people that we'd never heard of who are so rich within their industry and they're not famous. I would rather be that person than the person with 1 million followers on Instagram, but doesn't really have a solid business. Obviously you want both, but if you're to choose which one do you put more time into, it'd be the one within the industry. Which one is more valuable, I think, is the one within your own industry and not, known by everybody.
I think you're right, but I also think that if you've taken accountability under your own name enough, you get to a place where you can't lose. I'll give you an example. Who do you think about when you think about Irish property developer?
Johnny Ronan.
Of course. That's exactly what I was thinking of. His name is on all of the biggest buildings that are going up around Dublin today, Salesforce Tower, all that type of stuff. He's always in the paper trying to build the biggest thing, even though he may not. That might be a PR stunt, in my opinion. To say it might not be. He might actually be trying to build those things, but gets him in the paper saying that he's trying to develop the city, all that type of stuff. He had a lot of, I don't know too much about him, but I know they had a lot of trouble with NAM and all that type of stuff during the crash, all that stuff, and he was kind of broke again. But now he's back building the biggest projects. I believe he raised some money from pension funds in America or something like that. Again, I don't know too much of the details, but when they look him up, they he's the guy that's trying to build the biggest buildings in Dublin. He has that type of accountability. Every time you go into town, you see his last name on all these giant projects. I think that if he goes bust again, he'll get money again. Who else are you going to invest in? He's obviously, one who's built, or you could, if you don't fail that big under your own name, if it's under a company name or something that you own, it's kind of like a little bit more opaque. I don't think you have that bounce back ability. There's loads of, I think there's a good few people like that that have put the name on it, and I think it's something that's under taught in work and under taught in schools, where make sure that you get the credit. Even failing.
Yeah, I do think people just when it comes to social media, though, I think people may think your name in social media is actually worth more than it is to have a lot of followers. You think you might be rich because of that. It's not the same as what you're saying with him.
Yeah,
I
don't mean, that's.
But the fact is, opportunities, like I have a following on the likes of Instagram, opportunities have come my way because the name is out there and it's doing the work for you.
Yeah,
and if somebody's looking for something, they'll find me. Yeah.
I think Owen O'Connor has a little bit of that. I talked about that conversation that we had. Everyone kind of knew the name. I know I saw stuff like in the Kilkenny shops, and I feel like he's got a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think there is some people who just want to have a big following on social media because it feeds your ego, and they could give or take actually making a lot of money off it. Whereas I think a lot of people, and me included, would prefer not to be on social media and have that distraction and actually still have the name, if that makes sense.
100%.
Yeah.
I just remind me there of Owen when he was talking about how he's filling postal vans with orders. I don't know. I just love that image. I love. Okay. Anyway, so here we go. So this one is actually about leverage. I skipped ahead a little bit. Leverage is going to be the thing that's going to make you rich. Here we go.
Bridge. Do you think a choice of business model or a choice of product can also bring a kind of leverage to it? For example, pursuing a business that has network effects, pursuing a business that has brand effects, or other choices of business model that people could manipulate.
So for those listeners out there that aren't in technology, network effects, does that ring a bell, Mark?
Is it like Facebook and stuff?
So yeah, it is kind of like Facebook. So the more like the value of the business is the amount of nodes in the business, the amount of users. So project management tools are a good thing of that. The more people who use the tool, the more people that need to use the tool. You have to be on LinkedIn. That's a great network effect. You have to be. That's everyone, because the more people that are on it, the more people that have to be on it. So so when he's talking about business effects, or when he's talking about network effects in like tech startups, that's what people are kind of looking for when they're doing investments.
So it grows like a root or a tree.
Yeah, it grows. So it's kind of undeniable. Like you have to, even if people don't like LinkedIn, they kind of still have to be on it. True. That's a great business model because
it's risky in that though. If people stop using it at the early stage, like a few of those social medias that had promised at the start, and remember there's one Joe Rogan was using, can't remember the name of it. A lot of people got on and it just stopped growing, and then it has to reach a point where it just becomes then uncontrollable.
Exactly, and that's the biggest That's the biggest hurdle, and that's why it's so hard to do. It's the hardest company to start, one that's based on network effects.
That just give you free leverage.
Yeah, there's some really good microeconomic concepts that are important to understand. One of those is scale economies, which is the more you produce of something, the cheaper it gets to make it. That's something that a lot of businesses have, basic economics 101. And you should try and get into a business where making widget number 12 is cheaper than making widget number 5, and making widget number 10,000 is a lot cheaper than the previous ones. And this builds up an automatic sort of barrier to entry against competition and getting commoditized. So that's an important one. Another one, this is along the same lines, but technology products especially and media products have this great quality where they have zero marginal cost of reproduction. So creating another copy of what you just created is free. So when somebody listens to this podcast or watches a YouTube video about this, it doesn't cost me anything for the next person who shows up. Those zero marginal cost things, they take a while to get going because you make very little money per user, but over time they can really, really add up. So Joe Rogan is working no harder on his current podcast than he was on podcast number 1. But on podcast number 1100, he's making $1 million for the podcast, whereas for the previous one, he probably lost money for the first one. That's an example of zero marginal cost. And then the most subtle but the most important is this idea of network effects. And it comes from computer networking. Bob Metcalfe, who created Ethernet, famously coined Metcalfe's law, which is the value of a network is proportional to the square of the number of nodes in the network. So if a network of size 10 would have a value of 100, network of a size 100 would have a value of 10,000. It's not just 10x more, it's 100x more because it's a square. So the difference is in the square. So you want to be in a network effects business, assuming you're not number 2. If you're number 1 in a network effect business, you win everything. So example, if you look at Facebook, right, your friends and family social networking protocol, who's their competitor? Nobody, because they won everything through network effects, which is why when people say, well, I can just switch away from Facebook, they don't realize that network effects create natural monopolies. They're very, very powerful things. And one of the dirty secrets of Silicon Valley is that a lot of the winning businesses are natural monopolies. Even ride sharing tends towards one winner take all system. Like Uber will always have better economics than Lyft as long as it's moving more drivers and more riders around. Something like Google, there's basically only one viable search engine. I do like DuckDuckGo, privacy reasons, but they're just always going to be behind because of network effects. Twitter, right? Where else would you go for microblogging? Even YouTube has weak network effects, but they're still powerful enough. There's really no number 2 site that you go to consume your video on a regular basis. It even turns out in e-tail, Amazon, Prime, and convenience, stored credit cards and information creates a powerful network effect. So what is a network effect? Let's just define it precisely. A network effect is when each additional user adds value to the existing user base. So your users themselves are creating some value for the existing users. The classic example that I think everybody can understand is language. Let's say that there's 100 people who live in the community and speak 10 different languages, and each person just speaks one of those 10. Well, you're having to translate all the time. It's incredibly painful. But if all 100 of you spoke the same language, it would add tremendous value. And so the way that community will play out is 10 people start out speaking 10 languages. So let's say that one extra person learns English. Well, now all of a sudden, 11 people know English. So the next person comes in to learn a new language, probably going to choose English. At some point, let's say English gets to 20 or 25 people, it's done. It's just going to own the entire language marketplace, and the rest of the languages will get competed out, which is why long term, the entire world is probably going to end up speaking English and Chinese. China is closed off on the internet, but the internet itself is a great leveler, and people who want to communicate on the internet are forced to speak English because the largest community of people on the internet speaks English. I always feel bad for my colleagues who grew up speaking foreign languages in foreign countries because you don't have access to so many books. So many books just haven't been translated into other languages. So if you only spoke French or you only spoke German or you only spoke Hindi, for example, you would be at a severe disadvantage in a technical education. Invariably, if you go and get a technical education, you have to learn English just because you have to read these books that have this data that has not been translated. So languages are probably the oldest example of a network effect. Money is another example. We should all probably be using the same money, except for the fact that geographic and regulatory boundaries have created these artificial islands of money. But even then, the world tends to use a single currency as the reserve currency at most times, currently the US dollar. So network effects are a very powerful concept. When you're picking a business model, it's really good idea to pick a model where you can benefit from network effects, low marginal costs, and scale economies. And these tend to go together. Like anything that has zero marginal cost of production obviously has scale economies, and things that have zero.
So Mark, he covered a lot there, okay? And there was a lot of stuff there around network effects. And I think a lot of people that are listening to this and they're trying to get rich, they may not have a technical background, or they may think that, okay, I'm not going to start Facebook and stuff like that. And that's always something that annoys me as well with those types of, those books on, Zuckerberg and stuff. I don't, the likelihood of you becoming that and getting rich that way is low. But I think that there's, by implementing some of the stuff that he talked about there in the planning phase of starting a business, if you're looking for a business with zero marginal costs, or very close to zero marginal costs of someone else buying your product, I think that could be a really good place to start when you're building your business. So if you're like, and there's loads of businesses out there now because of the internet. So say if you wanted to start an online course, a very niche course around something that people really need to learn. Every time someone buys that course from you, it doesn't cost you anything else.
Yeah,
that is a beautiful business. Every time,
it's almost the opposite to when I was selling original paintings.
Exactly.
All those hours into the one painting, sold, gone forever.
Yeah.
Start again.
Yeah. So the marginal cost for you in hours terms was quite high in that case. Some of the efficiencies that he's talking about there, if you're thinking about starting a business, or if you're kind of going to build a Me Too business afterwards, like something that's already been in place, but you're going to put a new spin on it, having a low marginal cost is something that wasn't possible 100 years ago, because there was too many kind of monopolies. They had the economies of scale, where if they build 1 million widgets, they do it for a penny each, but you can't compete because you make 10 and they're a tenner each. Do you know?
Yeah, it must be so hard to build a company like that, though. Like, you think about music, for example. That's probably an example. Selling an album.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter how many extra people buy the album. It's the same. All the work has gone into it. But look, Spotify came in because of the nature of it. Like,
but in that case, instead of thinking about you're having to build a business yourself, in that case, if you have some sort of intellectual property that's worth something, you can think about using the network effect in a franchising, or not publishing, what would you call it, like licensing. So say if you've got a really good idea and it works well and that type of thing, you license it to whoever in different countries. Some people have even done this with things that are as kind of flimsy as like coaching protocol. Not flimsy is the wrong word, but you know what I mean, like not like a hard product, like the way of here's an example, like Bikram yoga. That guy tried to he's not a great I don't know why I brought up Bikram. Stay away from Bikram. Okay, the people who develop like yoga programs, and then you do their type of yoga. So obviously every time that they can only do one class at a time, and they can only fit 100 people in their room, so they can only make €1,000 a go or whatever. But if they license that intellectual property, it's kind of endless, and they get that network effect that way. So it's not just for social media.
People being taught then can teach themselves, can teach others, themselves, and then
you can
network.
Eventually you can set up like an 8-week yoga teacher course in a hotel in Beverly Hills, and like Bikram did. And then they all go out and make money for you. So the kind of one-to-many thing doesn't have to be just technology. I think that you could.
You have to use. No, you don't have to use technology for that. Actually, well,
it helps. But I think that if you sat down with somebody who is starting a business, or 6 months or a year into a business, and they're saying things are going well, but I don't see how I'm going to get rich here. I think that happens a lot with. We've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs on this podcast as well, and sometimes that's happened where they say, maybe not on air, but they might say like I don't know how I'm going to sell this, or if I sell this, it's not like I'm the one that's doing everything. What am I selling? Do you know? So when you have,
it has to be like if you want to be rich, basically, it kind of has the product or the service has to be scalable.
Yeah, and random stuff can be scalable. Like I forget the name of the company now, but there's a huge company in America for taking away people's rubbish, and it's a franchisee thing, and it's everywhere, all over Canada, all over America, and the guys are making whatever 100 million a year from just collecting rubbish and putting a sign on the vans. Basically, like, you know,
How do we put Ballybrack waste on steroids?
I see those guys everywhere. Let's get them on the podcast, see what we can do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so something to think about when baby Shay grows up and he's starting his own business under his own name, all that good stuff, all the accountability. I was saying, make sure that when we start this, there's leverage. A good example is Stephen from the Happy Pair that we had on. Like, that's one shop. Well, it's not one shop anymore, but it was one shop here in Greystones, and they have leveraged technology and social media. So people, they're getting the message out there all the time. They've leveraged Sainsbury's in the UK to distribute their stuff way beyond just a shop in Greystones. So type of way. So,
but in a weird way, they keep the small feel and have all the arms coming out of it as well, all the branches. But yet they still do the swims, the local swims, and so that's the ideal situation. Then I think. If that's the kind of person that you are.
But okay, so that was the second last one. Let's wrap up on this last one here. But I think that people who listen to this that are like, this isn't kind of get rich quick schemes, but they're kind of more foundations about if you were going to get rich. And we never really define that properly at the beginning, but whatever rich means to you, I think that this is a good one to end on.
You should avoid other than renting a.
Yeah, there are two tweets that I put out that are related. So the first one was we were talking about like how your lifestyle, has to upgrade, shouldn't get upgraded too fast. And that one basically said, people who are living far below their means enjoy a freedom that people busy upgrading their lifestyles just can't fathom. And I think that's very important, like just to not upgrade your lifestyle all the time to maintain your freedom. And it just gives you freedom of operation. You basically, once you make a little bit of money, you still want to be living like your old self, so that just the worry goes away. So don't run out to upgrade that house and lifestyle and all that stuff. Let's say you're getting paid $1,000 an hour. The problem is that when you go into a work lifestyle like that, you don't just suddenly go from making $20 an hour to making $1,000 an hour. That's a progression over a long career. And as that happens, one subtle problem is that you upgrade your lifestyle as you make more and more money. And that upgrading of the lifestyle kind of ups what you consider to be wealth, and you stay in this wage slave trap. So I forget who said it. Maybe it was Nassim Taleb, but he said, the most dangerous things are heroin and a monthly salary, right? Because they're highly addictive. The way you want to get wealthy is you want to be poor and working and working and working. And this is, for example, how the tech industry works, where you don't make any money for 10 years. And then suddenly in year 11, you might have a giant payday, which is why, by the way, one reason why these very high marginal tax rates for the so-called wealthy are flawed, because the highest risk-taking, most creative professions, you literally lose money for a decade of your life while you take massive risk and you bleed and bleed and bleed. And then suddenly in year 11 or year 15, you might have one single big payday. But then, of course, Uncle Sam show up and basically say, hey, you know what? You just made a lot of money this year. Therefore, you're rich. Therefore, you're evil. And you got to hand it all over to us.
So that's the last one we're going to have a chat about today. But I think it's a really good one if people are kind of in any industry. If you're living below your means, the only time I've ever really been stressed out is when I was maybe overstretched financially. Do you like that way? And if you're building a business, if you're trying to get rich one day, spending the money now that you have instead of plowing it back into the business or whatever, I think is a really good takeaway. Something that he said at the end there really reminded me of our friend Mark Flood, who was on the podcast ages ago. That was probably about a year ago. So for those of you who haven't listened to that one yet, it's really interesting one. It's all about private equity and how he's kind of targeting kind of SMEs in Ireland for that. And he was talking about how Ireland punished those entrepreneurs who have been bleeding for 10 years, not making any money, like foregoing salaries that they could have got in the private sector the private sector for 10 years, and then they get one payday and we hit them with as much tax as we can on that. So you are incentivized in Ireland to not take risks. You're incentivized in Ireland not to try to go for big wins. You're incentivized to stay lower middle class, maybe, because in the middle class you get taxed so much anyway. Or, we even go so far in Ireland to means test people for things that they need from the government when they need it. So if you, like, the people who are contributing the most to the pot get the least out. And it just makes people go, well, I could spend 10 years building something and have a big payday, or I could just get a job in the council.
Yeah. So that 10 years of struggle, unlike a business, like you can't, as a person, you can't offset the losses or the potential losses that you made during those years against the big windfall that comes
the
from
opportunity
taking that risk.
You can't put your opportunity cost. Well, we would have made this. That's kind of a.
I don't know if other countries do that though. Do they?
No, but I think a lot of other countries have a very low, not very low, but like a considerably lower capital gains. I think capital should be. This is that's going to be controversial.
I think
it should be -5. They pay you to take risks. Because that's the only time.
Well, I think it would certainly it would increase what's the word I'm looking for?
Innovation, yeah.
It really would, yeah.
Like, it would just incentivize people to, like, I think anything that you make from that's not labor should be tax-free, because that's how you're going to get off the government teat. That's how you become independent. If you have assets that are producing for you. So, okay, fair enough. Charge me for working, because you guys are setting up the system for that. But you guys didn't do anything for me to take a long position on euro dollar. You guys didn't do anything for that. You don't get anything. I took the risk. If I lost, so I go to you guys and say, we'll go halves on that. So they'd be like,
nice.
Yeah, I lost all the money, but you were going to tax me if I won. I know, you fucking keep your own losses. We'll come in when the win comes in. Then we'll take half.
Yeah.
It's like a vindictive wife from an Eddie Murphy sketch. Take half. It's great. Okay. So what was that? Okay, so let's wrap it up there today. I think this is going to be, like, I love doing these kind of one-on-ones with Mark sometimes as well, to have a chat about how business is going, kind of getting rich. As I get older, getting rich to me means, like I said at the beginning, just having enough assets where you don't have to worry. I think worry is the biggest thing to avoid. Once you're not worried about money, you're kind of rich.
Yeah. Money can certainly alleviate worries and pain and stuff like that. But then there is diminishing returns after a certain amount. We all know it doesn't make you happier having, 3 million as opposed to 2.5, that type of thing.
What's the number, Mark? I
told you it's 10.
10. 10 million.
After just saying the 3 million is not going to make me any more happy.
The 10 million, I don't know.
Or
you don't show up to these podcasts. You got, you don't, at 10 million, you don't show up to the podcast anymore. That's all over.
10 million, that's all I do, Luke.
Yeah. That's all I do. Just 24-hour day in the life. Become a real, like, narcissist. Be like, think that everything that we do is really interesting, and, like,
yeah, I'm gonna pay for 5 million followers on Instagram.
That guy, I forget his name now. The guy that has oh my god, the Fantasy Factory.
No.
Oh my god, I'm gonna send you. If anyone, you guys listening, you're shouting at your podcast right now. Dirk something.
Okay, and what's the gist?
So basically, he was a really successful guy. He was like a skateboarder. And then he had an MTV show for 10 years called Fantasy Factory, where he just did crazy stuff with money. Like, he'd have like a warehouse and they'd do something crazy.
They do that on YouTube. That's a big thing on YouTube at the moment.
Yeah, kind of like the Mr. Beast thing. Just doing crazy stuff. Like,
one day to spend $1 million. Yeah, that kind of thing.
I'll click on that. as I just watch the person throwing around $1 million while I'm shoving like fruit and fiber into my mouth, just like it's a zombie. Sometimes I think about that. I watch YouTube so much, like, I have it on the background sometimes when I'm working. I'm just thinking, I wonder if there was a camera on me watching this, would that just be just this slob staring like a zombie into this?
Depends what you're watching.
Yeah, just food for thought out there. But okay, so I'm going to take this the podcast this one particularly, there's going to be, out of the 70 or so podcasts that we've done, there's going to be probably 5 or 6 that I'm going to earmark for my son to listen to years from now.
Yeah.
So,
At the core of it, this is why we kind of did the podcast. We were having these chats anyway, so this is the chats. Probably less expletives and rants that there would be in the real chat.
Even though one kind of slipped out at the end.
Yeah. You not cut them out?
No, we don't cut things out here. Okay, cool. So why don't we wrap it up today? Next week we've got a couple of more guests lined up. It's going to be great. We're getting some momentum coming into Q2, Q3, Q4, and we're coming up on a big milestone from downloads. So thank you so much for all the people that are listening to this every week. And we're going to make sure that we keep on keeping on. We're going to go to 100 anyway, and we're going to see where we're going to go from there. But we're working on a few kind of projects to maybe even take this to the next level. So until next week, keep moving forward.